We start every event with a prayer and pledge, and that will be led today by John Byron.
My mask. Are you ready? Dear Heavenly Father, we come today here as a group before you, seeking your blessing on us, on this state of New Mexico, and our great nation. We ask your blessing especially, and bring your healing powers to our President, Donald Trump. Be with him, be with his family, be with those that are around him. And give them your guidance, your comfort, and to bring him back to full health. We also ask your blessing on this country with the whole COVID challenges, and be with us and provide us those healing powers across this country and across the world, Lord. Jay, we ask your blessing on this group. Help us give good information to the Deputy Secretary, to let him do what he needs to do, and to be a guidance for us, and do the things that we need to do to keep this state healthy and this industry healthy. And we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
The pledge.
See, I was going to lead the pledge, which I don't think I've led the pledge since first grade in Mrs. Duncan's class. Hopefully I can do all right. Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
This morning, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Deputy Secretary Mark Menezes. He serves as the department's principal advisor on energy policy and on a wide array of existing and emerging energy technologies. The Deputy Secretary is responsible for driving transformative energy progress and technology solutions through coordinated planning, management, and innovation. And now he will give some brief comments, and then we will do self-introductions with our special guests that are with us today.
Well, thank you, Paula, for that introduction. And indeed, it is a pleasure to be with you here today. I look forward to our conversations this morning. It's important that we focus on two things that really have vaulted the United States into a global powerhouse, and that's oil and that's natural gas. And as we know, before COVID-19, the United States under President Trump's leadership, really, we became, for the first time, an energy-independent country. And as I had mentioned, the United States has become the #1 producer globally with oil and natural gas. This was a tremendous boon for America's businesses, America's workers, American consumers. It provided millions of consumers with affordable and reliable energy supply. Using natural gas saves us $203 billion annually. That's $2,500 for a family of 4 annually. Here in New Mexico, I was talking to Ryan earlier, annual crude production has more than doubled between 2013 and 2018. The state has risen from the 7th largest oil producer to the 3rd largest oil producer, New Mexico. And thanks to the shale revolution, we are now a net natural gas exporter. Now, unfortunately, the COVID crisis has led to massive disruptions in demand, and it's caused our U.S. consumption to drop at levels that we haven't seen in decades. This, of course, has put many of our producers into bankruptcy, and it has resulted in a fairly serious glut of supply. But in response to the demand destruction of COVID and the actions of Saudi Arabia and Russia to overproduce at about the time that COVID was breaking. They were overproducing supply of oil, and Saudi Arabia engaged in what we would describe in the U.S. as predatory pricing, which would be illegal. They drove the price down to below market. And it was a double whammy. But because of the shale revolution and because of some people in this room where we began to produce, because the U.S. was the #1 leading producer of oil in the world, President Trump was able to deal with Russia and Saudi Arabia, and indeed OPEC nations, in a way that historically the United States has never been able to do. And so for the first time in history, you saw it was the United States essentially telling the OPEC countries what the production levels should be, and reined in the predatory pricing of Saudi Arabia. Think about it. Never before in our lives has that happened. I remember the energy crisis of the 70s. That gave rise to the Department of Energy. And no one thought back then that we would have found, either developed the technology to unleash our resources, the resources we didn't even know we had. But it's really through innovation that we've been able to increase production, find resources, and again, claim the rightful place on the global stage in the energy space. Now, the good news today is that, our economy is reviving. And the long-term outlook for U.S. oil and gas production still remains strong. I noticed some rig counts are improving. Permits on federal land has been increasing. Because we believe that the same factors that ignited the revolution remain in place. And as I had mentioned, the United States has always been a nation of innovators. And it's really been the innovation that has put us in the driver's seat of both energy and being the economic powerhouse that the United States became prior to COVID. And it was the energy development that drove that. The president, of course, negotiated and signed into law the biggest tax reform in 40 years. You've seen his efforts with deregulation. He had issued an executive order which required agencies to reduce, for every one regulation that his administration would propose, we had to do away with 2. So we went about it and we looked at regulations. Our average is that this administration has reduced 8.5 existing regulations to every one that we have proposed. So with tax reform, deregulation efforts, and of course his trade negotiations. LNG exports, because of the development of the shale revolution, the DOE has been authorizing LNG export facilities. They have been meeting final investment dates on time. And as a consequence, we have been exporting LNG to countries that before we had trade deficits. And so we are reducing, natural gas is playing a key role in reducing our trade deficit. Our national laboratories, DOE has 17 national laboratories, and they continue to be incubators of innovation for every energy resource at every energy stage, from sustainable and responsible production to reliable transportation and delivery. And it's thanks to innovation that we're producing this energy much more abundantly and affordably. And while we're here to talk about oil and natural gas, we're an all of the above administration, and we're producing it from all sources, and more than any other nation. And it's thanks to innovation that you see us reducing energy-related carbon emissions. People might not be aware of this based on what you read in the paper, but the United States is leading the world by several orders of magnitude in actual energy-related greenhouse gas reductions. Several orders of magnitude, leading the world. reducing it more than all the signatories to the Paris Accord. And yet, as well as we're doing, and what's driving a lot of that is that in the power sector, we're using natural gas. We're building more natural gas units, the very efficient combined cycle units. We're trying to build the pipelines to carry the natural gas to where it's needed. Natural gas complements bringing on renewables so that they can ramp up and down. And so, except for the nuclear plant in Georgia, the Vogtle power plant, all new generation that we're building in the U.S. is natural gas and renewables. But we're also revitalizing, nuclear energy. We do not want to cede global leadership to Russia and China. And so it's important that this administration also continues to invest in that. As I've mentioned, we are the number 2 producer in renewable energy. And we're producing cleaner coal. I'm here also later to talk about the possibility of putting CCUS on the San Juan facility outside of Farmington. So, we're all of the above. So in short, while we're still facing the consequences of COVID-19 in the energy arena, especially in the oil and gas sector, we're seeing signs of revival. And if we continue to favor innovation over regulation, we believe that America's energy revolution will continue, with oil and gas playing a pivotal role. And on that note, I'd like to announce today the release of our new DOE report entitled U.S. Oil and Natural Gas, Providing Energy Security and Supporting Our Quality of Life. This report focuses on the key benefits of oil and gas and the important innovative advances in oil and natural gas production technology that has made this growth possible. And let me add that this report arrives really not a moment too soon, because simply stated, we must take a powerful, fact-based stand against those, in the name of protecting the environment, are proposing that we ban every form of energy we have, with the exception of renewables. And let's not make any mistake. This renewables-only policy would harm our energy security by making energy supply more expensive and scarce. It would harm our economic security by costing countless jobs, including 19 million whose livelihoods are supported by hydraulic fracturing. It would harm our national security by forcing us to rely on intermittent energy, imperiling the reliable flow of electricity across society while making us dependent once again on foreign sources to tackle this issue, and our allies at the total mercy, once again, of Russia and unfriendly suppliers. Ironically, given our world-leading strides in emissions reduction, this policy is not just harmful, it's not necessary at all. To move toward renewables, we need breakthrough technologies in battery and in storage that we're just not there yet. The department is spending very generously. We have announced storage initiatives. We are engaging in breaking through technologies, but we're simply not there yet. So it's still not achievable to simply go 100% renewables. So I'm confident that if we continue to focus on deregulations and smart policies, and we focus on innovation, that we will continue to make advancements in the energy space, creating great jobs and making our environment cleaner for everyone. So I'm happy to be here this morning, and I look forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Menezes. We're very honored to have him here today with the New Mexico Business Coalition. We are sitting in the warehouse with Michael Berezniak, the owner and president of Albuquerque Pipe and Pump Supply. We're here because this is where some of the action takes place. We've brought people from out of the field to be here today. What we'd like to do now is go around the room and do brief self-introductions of our honored guests that have joined us today, and then we will open this for discussion. We'll start with Senator Munoz.
Thank you, and good morning, and thank you for being here in New Mexico, and we appreciate you being here. I'm State Senator George Munoz. I am from Gallup, and I represent McKinley, San Juan, and Cibola counties in northwest New Mexico, which has everything you just mentioned, from uranium to coal to natural gas to power plants to refineries. Every industry in New Mexico is key, and those are big industries that support our people, and I appreciate you being here and listening to you today.
Larry Scott. I am state representative from District 62, southeast New Mexico, a little oil field town of Hobbs, the center of Permian Basin production and development activity, and one of the big reasons New Mexico has had its budget surplus in the last few years. I have been involved in the oil and gas business in southeast New Mexico for 40 years and see current conditions as significant concern to the continued development of resources in our part of the state.
Good morning, I'm John Byram. I'm Business Development Manager for PESCO, Process Equipment and Service Company out of Farmington. We manufacture production equipment for the oil and gas industry. We sell, we export a lot out of the state down to Texas, to the Eagle Ford, and all the way up north to the Bakken in North Dakota, north of Denver. So we had over 500 employees before COVID and the Saudi-Russian hit. Now we're down to about half of that. We're starting to see things rebound some. We also have been diversifying. We're working with Sandia National Labs technology spinoff called Biotech that is taking methane and converting that into hydrogen. So that's another potential use for the methane that we have here in this state, particularly the San Juan Basin. And then we're also working with New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology on some advanced water filtration technology that could maybe help the industry on cleaning up produced water, reducing those volumes. So we're definitely part of this industry and rely on it heavily. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Michael Berezniak. I'm president of Albuquerque Pipe and Pump Supply Company. We're an independent wholesale distributor of pipe, valves, fittings, and pumps. We're celebrating our 28th year in business in New Mexico, servicing contractors, energy producers, mining, manufacturing, water systems, and utilities. And it's an honor to host this event.
Ryan Davis, Operations Manager for Marion Oil and Gas out of Farmington, New Mexico, and also Board President for the Independent Petroleum Association of New Mexico, or IPNM. Marion Oil and Gas is a third generation oil and gas company that operates, headquartered in Farmington, New Mexico, but we operate throughout the Rockies, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming, and appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Buenos dias. Luis Salazar, Senior Regulatory Advocate with ConocoPhillips. I am based in our Santa Fe office. And today I'm really looking forward to learning, listening, participating, collaborating on the topics. I think this is a great group of leaders to do that with. And again, thank you for being here.
Good morning. Thank you, Michael, for hosting us, and thank you, Secretary Menezes, for inviting us to participate today. My name is Ann Bradbury, and I'm the CEO of the American Exploration and Production Council. We are a national trade association in Washington, D.C. that represents the largest onshore oil and gas producers in the U.S. We have about 25 members and about 10 of the largest operators here in New Mexico. As someone that leads an organization that is largely focused on DC advocacy on behalf of the oil and gas industry, we are very focused on both the policies and the rhetoric that we're hearing out of Washington, DC on both sides of the aisle. I want to thank you for all of your support for the industry. Our industry is looking for sensible regulations and policies that allow us to operate in a safe and sustainable manner. And we want to be a partner with government officials to develop and implement those regulations properly. So appreciate all that your organization is doing, and thank you for the opportunity to participate here today.
Hi, thank you very much, and thank you for having us, and Carla for putting this on. My name is State Senator Candace Gould. I represent Los Ranchos, and then the Paradise Hills west side of Albuquerque, and then the southwest corner of Rio Rancho. And I am a pro-energy legislature. My family's been in energy for 20 years. My focus in the legislature is to make sure that our energy is responsible, reliable, and affordable. And the over-regulations, the rhetoric that you said, all of this is hindering, and I think we need to make sure to remember that people demand energy. People are not going to go backwards in their energy. I heard an economist say that we used to ride horses, and now we put the horses in the back of our cars and drive them around. We're not going to go backwards. So it's up to us to figure out how to make this work in a responsible, reliable, and affordable way, and that's my focus.
The New Mexico Business Coalition has been very much a supporter of the oil and gas industry since we started over 11 years ago. Not only is it the lifeblood for us individually, it's the lifeblood of our state. It is 30 to 40% of the state's revenue, and it's critical to what we're doing, and that's why we've been a big supporter. Of course, we support that being done in a clean manner, and we have found our operators here are doing just that. They care about the environment because they live in the same place where they're drilling and operating, and so it's just as important to them. And that's the reason when we support other forms of energy, like renewables, they also depend on our oil and gas industry to produce those solar panels and those windmills. So everything comes back to oil and gas, and that's why we're a big supporter. We'd like to open this up now for general comments or questions that you have for Secretary Menezes.
So Deputy Secretary, as you mentioned, you were coming up to Farmington to talk to Mayor Dunkett about the carbon sequestration plans for the plant. Is that something that you see going forward? I think one thing that we may have concern about is additional power sources. There's talk about solar maybe being brought in, as well as potentially a water reservoir that would use pumped water for energy storage there in the San Juan County as well. We start to worry that there's not enough potentially power transmission going out to support that. So is that something that the government can make sure that that is basically not a problem for us?
Thank you for the question. I will be talking about that facility. So the current facility is, mine mouth operation, the coal facility there. And what the department has been looking at is really the possibility of keeping that unit running, but putting carbon capture, utilization, sequestration technology on it. I'll be announcing the release of a study today which evaluated Public Service in Mexico's their scenario of replacing that with some renewables, some natural gas and renewables, but like 100% renewables and solar. And so it looks at the costs of putting CCUS on that unit compared to what the cost would be from what Public Service in New Mexico did. So the exciting thing is that rather than eliminating a known source and bringing in the variable and intermittent renewables, can you save an existing plant, essentially? That workforce is known, technology is known, but on an existing facility, to put new technology on that essentially could be the breakthrough project that could help bring down the cost of carbon capture. And carbon capture technology, while we're talking about a coal plant here, we have been funding studies and analyses that carbon capture can be applied to natural gas, combustion on manufacturing processes, anything that uses a combustion technology that produces CO2. So while in New Mexico this is a coal facility, these technologies, we need to make sure that we can deploy them everywhere. Otherwise, we are essentially having to explain why it is that we're not doing away with any fuel, any fossil fuel that causes emissions. So we see this as a chance to develop some breakthrough technology. We have a history of taking for the department to take the technological risk on these technologies, because the technology is not there yet, it's not commercialized, there's no demand for it. But one way that we can help stop the negativity on use of all fossil fuels is to show that we can have technologies at ultimately an affordable price that can be put on units. Take that issue off the table completely. Just go to zero emissions. You can choose. You might want to have photovoltaics, but you also might want to have a natural gas facility with carbon capture on it. The electrons are the same in the power sector. And then once we do that, and the power sector is really all, natural gas has really taken our power sector already to be number 2 in emissions. Right now, the number 1 sector for emissions in the U.S. is transportation. Power sector is essentially taking care of itself and continues to drive down because of the natural gas and renewables. But that doesn't mean that we have maybe 20% now is nuclear, 20% of power production roughly is coal, but natural gas is the number 1 producer, and it's with the natural gas you're bringing on more renewables. But why not develop a technology that you can affordably put on existing units, save the jobs, keep all of the above, and take away that argument at all. We'll just go to net zero, develop the technologies, put it on electrons and electrons. Transportation, we talked about, methane to hydrogen, right? Now, if you're looking for emissions, you got to look in the transportation sector. And so where do you look? You look at liquid fuels, right? And you have to. So you have biofuels. And by the way, one of the CCS projects that we sponsored is on an ethanol plant. So again, it's wherever there are emissions, we hope that we can develop these technologies to put on, capture it, use it if we can, create new products, take advantage of what Congress passed, the 45Q tax credits. We ought to just avail ourselves of this. Take the high road on this, look for the technological breakthroughs, and let's continue to be the leader, that we are. That's what we're hopeful. And this plant could be an opportunity for us to demonstrate, that we're able to do this. On interstate transmission lines, I think, that's a perennial, that's always a problem. It's always difficult to build electric transmission lines, particularly in the West, where you have less dense population. You have to figure out how you apportion costs, for wires that might not serve necessarily the people, where the unit is. So that has always been a challenge. FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, has looked at ways to incentivize transmission pricing, to help sort of spread the cost out, on that. Permitting is certainly always an issue. Department of Interior is working on ways to, to streamline the permitting process, and this administration certainly has been that. But that's a problem. We have an office at DOE that helps with some of the analyses on the siting of the transmission, and I think that together with our sister agencies, we can help get the lines built and funded where we need them to be built and funded.
Mr. Secretary, we hear a lot of anti-fossil fuel rhetoric. My little community really lives and dies with oil and gas, despite our best efforts at diversification. Two areas of particular concern are access to federal leases and the conversations currently going on with respect to banning fracking. As a Washington insider, could you address whether either of those proposals has a realistic chance of coming to pass?
Well, thank you for that question. When you talk about banning fracking, I'll tell you a little story, and Ann is probably aware of this, but in a prior life, I was chief counsel to the House Energy and Commerce Committee during the Energy Policy Act days of '05, and in that bill is where Congress did the right thing. Congress actually exempted fracking from the Safe Drinking Water Act, which at that point made sure that EPA could not essentially put in place regulations at a time to ban it or to make it simply uneconomical. So Congress actually did the right thing, and that helped allow that with the breakthrough in the multi-directional drilling and the buffering techniques for fracking. It gave rise to this shale explosion. So we shouldn't go and undo that. Congress got it right then. Now, as a consequence of the feds staying out of it, it does give rise to let the states choose. But and so let the states lead on that. And it's groups like this that need to remind everybody that we can do this safely, we can do it environmentally in an environmentally sound way, and look at the results. Look at the jobs, the economic growth. But as I've mentioned, look at the reduction in emissions. I mean, fracking has resulted in way more reduction in our power sector. We need to tell that story, and we can't be shy about it, and we shouldn't be on the defensive about it. Work your states. I mean, New York, California, they may ban fracking, but states, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, so far. We need to make sure that we just get the facts out. All the studies that have been done on fracking have shown that it's safe. You're safe. It's miles below safe drinking water aquifers. There's just simply no there with respect to all the problems with fracking. And we're only getting more, more technologies and activity to where we learn, every day on how to make it that much safer and that much cleaner. I was at an announcement with EPA on the methane regulations, and we kept getting questions about, methane emissions, as though it was a byproduct of something. And EPA Administrator Wheeler and me, we had to make sure that we clarified, we're talking about natural gas. This is product, okay? The folks who are producing this they don't want to have, quote, fugitive emissions. This is product. So let's develop the technologies to where there are no. These aren't emissions as a result of combustion process. This is methane. This is just natural gas. People had no idea. They didn't believe what we were saying. So we just have to sit people down and just have a conversation with them. Make it conversational. I think, but it's people like us that need to just simply remind people really of what the facts are and be proud of it and have them join us instead. And I find that that's helpful. But I don't see, this president certainly will not sign anything. If Congress somehow decides to undo that, this president surely will not sign that into law.
Thank you. And I want you to know some things about New Mexico, because your agency is one of the most important that we have in New Mexico, because we have both labs. Oil and gas forms 42% of our state's budget. If a fracking ban would occur, New Mexico's budget would be decimated. I come from an area where I grew up with friends who have now lost their job from the refinery, from the power plant, because the Green New Deal, the Green Initiative. What's happened in San Juan is now going to happen in McKinley and Cibola counties, except with a little more devastation because we don't have that great of industry as they do. So for us in New Mexico, I personally would like you to invite you and look at our power plant and look at our coal mines and look at our refinery and see how the Department of Energy could help us in saving those jobs, rebuilding those refineries. We all know we have to become as environmentally safe as we can and environmentally right for the future. I agree with that. I have 2 young boys, and it's their future that we're trying to protect right now. But we can't decimate people's lives by losing a $100,000 a year job in an oil refinery in McKinley County that will never come back again. How do we save those jobs? How do we use technology to our advantage and with your help to keep those people employed, keep them in our state, keep them working, and for the entire state, to keep the entire state safe and on a level mode so we don't have to cut teacher pay, or you don't lose 42% of your budget. So my comment is I'd love to have you come visit us and talk about carbon capture on our refinery, carbon capture on our gas plants, and our coal mines.
I'd be more than happy to. I mean, you know, this is the microcosm here of the U.S., right here in New Mexico. As you mentioned, you know, you have all the resources and you have every type of job, whether, you know, in the oil and gas field, whether you're producing it, whether you're transporting it, you're processing it, you're refining it, you know, you have it all here. And I don't have to tell, you know, you all here, but these are great paying jobs. They're some of the best in the community. You know, these communities grew up around these industries. You know, they wanted to be part of it. They were pleased to be part of it. These are multi-generational jobs, right? I mean, I'm from Louisiana in the petrochemical area. Everybody who wanted a job could get a job. They could get high-paying jobs. And it's part of a bigger process. What has happened in New Mexico, really, in no small measure, has really allowed the president to do what he did with these OPEC countries. I mean, I started my conversation with this. But that's something that people ought to feel proud of, and they want to be part of that. And it's real because it's true. These are policies we need to have in place, and we need to be in a position of just, you know, a fact squad, right? You know, on the refineries, you know, we will always have challenges, it seems, building the infrastructure. You talked about it, electricity transmission lines. I mean, let's face it, any kind of energy infrastructure project now we have cottage industries whose job it is, they can raise money if they can just stop something. And so, while it used to be refineries or petrochemical plants, you know, or electric transmission lines, no, now it's pipelines. You know, they won't have any pipelines. And it doesn't stop there, though. We're now getting people blocking, you know, solar farms and wind farms. They just, it's gotten so out of kilter here that it's simply no for every kind of technology. So, you know, for the first time, green groups are joining infrastructure groups to try to make sure that you have policies in place that allow infrastructure to continue to be built. Because if we lose focus on that, then it islands, you know, refineries, and it islands other industries. So we need to make sure that we keep a comprehensive approach about it. And I can assure you, at the Department of Energy, you know, that's what we're all about. You mentioned the 2 labs. You know, they are very important to the DOE. You know, that mission. You know, it's a lot of it's classified what those labs do. We know, but they were key parts of the Manhattan Project. And we need to continue, you know, to keep that leadership there. That's the other thing that keeps America strong. And so we're spending a lot of money there at those labs, you know, to ensure that our nuclear deterrent remains not only maintained, but that it's modernized. And that's a priority of this administration as well. And you'll see from our budget, those labs get a considerable amount of money. New Mexico gets a tremendous amount of money, you know, from DOE. And so we have a great relationship. Really, both the New Mexico senators voted for my confirmation. You know, we don't see eye to eye with them on every single issue, but they know that we're there, that we're with them on the issues that really matter. And I think that on the issues we don't agree with, we agree that education is the best policy forward, so that we make prudent and wise decisions, but also for the health of the economy of New Mexico.
Deputy Secretary, I have a question. I mentioned earlier about operating in the San Juan Basin. As you know, it's primarily natural gas. And since about 2009, 2008, natural gas prices have been relatively low. We kind of became our own worst enemy in terms of being pretty good at getting it out of the ground. One of the initiatives in the San Juan Basin has been looking for new markets. We've really been displaced out of a lot of the markets that we used to deliver gas to. Again, natural gas across the country has been on the rise, and so I know there's an effort to take gas from the San Juan Basin and get it to the Baja of Mexico, and I believe it's Costa Azul. There's a facility there that was an import, or built as an import terminal, and there's talks about turning that around to make that an export facility. And I was just curious to what capacity the DOE would get involved in something like that to help develop new markets and take away capacity for natural gas.
Thank you. A great question. Specifically with respect to exports to Mexico, we have an international affairs office. Both former Secretary Rick Perry and current Secretary Dan Briette have fairly regular conversations with counterparts in Mexico to ensure that we are able to export some of our U.S. natural gas, and as you had pointed out, to potentially one, maybe two LNG export facilities. We have, I think, the U.S. permits in place on that, ready to go, but we have been engaging in conversations with that. We're reasonably optimistic that we'll be able to work things out with the government of Mexico, so we're reasonably optimistic that we can get the positive results that we want there. The other thing too, you have natural gas here that certainly could be used in California. It could also be exported on the West Coast. So when you look for exports, we've authorized one LNG export facility off the coast of Oregon at Coos Bay. We also have authorized two out of Alaska, a small one and a fairly large one. So we put that in motion for them to see if they can bring that to final investment decision for those to export on the West Coast. I know Senator Murkowski was excited about the one in Alaska. The senators from Oregon were not as excited about us granting the permits, the authorization for Oregon, but the business community certainly is. Then the key will be, how do you get it there? How do you transport natural gas to, let's just assume, to the West Coast? As you know, you might be aware of our efforts on the export port. If we can get the permits there to keep that open, that's a battle with the states. But we're doing, what we can there. You might have seen that during the recent heat wave in California, we issued an emergency order that required the state to run 3 natural gas plants. That was because, under their state restrictions on air emissions, they would have violated, their air emission standards and similarly the federal standards. So we issued an emergency order which allowed those units to run. Obviously it helped. The Californians need to figure out a way to get the supply of natural gas and other ways to generate electricity when their citizens actually need it the most. If they need it when energy is high. In other parts of the nation, they need it when when the temperatures are low. So it's an ongoing process. But at the federal level, I want you to be reassured, we're constantly working toward getting the West Coast open for use and for export of the U.S. Natural gas. Likewise on the East Coast, we're also battling states that have, in our view, abused their authority under the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Acts, where they see that delegated authority is interpreted as their ability to say no, rather than as it was envisioned when Congress delegated the authority to actually make sure you could say yes to get it done. So it's an ongoing battle, but this administration really commits to continuing our efforts to get these things a reality.
I do have a follow-up question there, but I didn't want to hog the mic. Related to the takeaway capacity on the northeast part of the country, there's tremendous amount of gas in Pennsylvania and Ohio and West Virginia. I've got a cousin that lives in New Hampshire, and I was just amazed by what they pay for energy in New England. And it's kind of related to what you were discussing there, just in the fact that the gas is right there, but you can't get it across New York. Is there any efforts in terms of the DOE and trying to get natural gas to New England?
Yeah, we definitely have joined our interagency partners to combat what we think, the states do not have the authority that they've asserted. So we have filed, on the legal side, we participate in the court proceedings. We have, looked at any number of ways on how it is that we can try to get the natural gas into the mid-Atlantic states and New England. You're absolutely right. I mean, all studies show that their prices, are higher, and they simply pay that when they don't need to. We have a hard time getting it through the state of New York, and up there. It's amazing when, you look at what the state of New York did by closing a nuclear plant and then developing offshore wind, but having policies in place that the offshore wind, has to be so far offshore so that you don't destroy anybody's view shed. And so you're beyond the curvature of the earth, essentially, with these offshore wind. You're in harsh environments. We really don't yet have the capability yet to ensure that we can have these offshore wind units operate in that harsh environment. That area of the country, few people really know this, but beyond the just say no for any reason, campaigns.
Like many western states, New Mexico has a dearth of water resources, and I'm not the most savvy in this area, but I know that a lot of the opposition to fracking in this state has to do with confusion, misinformation, or lack of clarity on the reuse or the recharge of the production water or backflow water. Is the Department of Energy doing anything to kind of quantify or kind of put some science behind it to allay some of the fears that people have?
Well, thank you for the question. We have, in fact, we've, issued a challenge. It's a water challenge where we look at ways to determine how to use this produced water, to make it, to reuse it. And we've also looked at desal. Water is precious in the West. Water, frankly, is precious, in most places in the world. And so we're developing the technologies so that we can use to recycle or reprocess the produced water as a consequence of hydraulic fracturing. This is a good thing. This is water that, in fact, can be reused. It's not wasted. It's not wasted water. It's and we see too the benefits of desalination as well. So you have the benefit of developing a technology that not only states can use here, but other countries on desalination. You combine that with technologies to apply to produce water, and really you have a win-win for everybody. So we're investing in technologies. You can go to our website to find out about this challenge that we have. It's the water, energy nexus where you see, because water, I don't have to tell anybody here, but water in the West is as precious as the oil that comes out of the ground, and so we're working with our other agencies to see how it is that we can utilize this resource and do it in a responsible way, but do it in a cost-effective way as well.
One more question for me, Deputy Secretary. One of the things that really concerns me, you see the blackouts in California, and the whole idea is that we're going to go all renewable. Now the Californians are saying 2035, no gasoline cars. But there's been shown over the last 30 years, there's been a few times that we've had 5 to 10 days of no wind and no sun. And those are those kinds of events happen from time to time, or you could have a volcanic eruption that could do things that we've seen in history. So, is the Department of Energy working to figure out what kind of level is kind of the max that we can get to with renewables and educate people? And we just are not going to be able to go to 100% renewables. We need natural gas generation. We need other ways to be able to generate electricity when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, and that will happen, even though nobody saw the worldwide pandemic coming. Nobody's going to see that kind of event either, but it'll happen.
No, that's a great question. And indeed we have a lot of modeling, that's taking place across the country and in different regions, because as you know, we're not one central grid that is operated by the U.S. Our system was built, incrementally over time, and so we have a lot of physical constraints, if you will, on our system in some places. But we're constantly looking at this, and studies have, come out of this department from the prior administration, that would lead you to believe that we could get to, I think this came out maybe in 2016, a study, so this would have been prior administration, on renewables. And so my recollection was, the study said, look, you can probably get to about 30% of renewables with some breakthroughs in technologies, and that's achievable. And then my recollection was it went to like 60%, and it said, well, now this is much harder to do. You can do it, and then it listed all the things that you have to do. You have to make investments, you have to change this policy, you have to build, this much. And then it said, and then there was a section that said, now 80%. The report, and I'm paraphrasing this report because we've done studies since that, but I remember when I read it, it said 80%. Is it possible? It's possible. Okay, but this is what you would have to do. You'd have to build orders of magnitude more of renewables of every type. We have land space issues. You have to rebuild the transmission lines. We have to have breakthrough battery technologies that we don't even have. Is it possible? Yes. But by the way, we're not putting a cost on this because it's too complicated to figure out how much it would cost to rebuild our electric grid. So what does the press write? The press writes 80% renewables is doable. That's all the studies. I mean, that's what you read. Well, but nobody read the report. So our reports, coming out usually try to do the cost side of things. There is a cost. I tell this story because we need to have a conversation about it. We can't be shy about this. So the Livermore Foundation, Lawrence Livermore Foundation, it's not really part of DOE, but it's a foundation of one of our labs, did a study for the state of California on how it is that they could meet their net zero emissions by, I think, 2040. I think that's their date. The assumptions were no major changes in policy. Okay, just we're not going to talk about a tax. We're not going to talk about a 100% renewable mandate. We're not going to talk about that. And we're just going to assume existing technologies, and we're going to do a cost analysis. I said, well, I got to read this report. Well, I did. It's a short report. Everybody ought to read it. They said, this is the way you do this. All right, first thing they said, net zero does not mean 100% renewable. Forget any discussion that we're going to do away with fossil fuels. We're not going to do it. Okay, so what do? We look at existing combustion. Okay, so they say, all right, on our refineries, on our manufacturers that use carbon, guess what we have to do? There's existing carbon capture technology today that we can put on those facilities. Make them net zero emissions. Recognize it. Don't ban them. Don't ban them. They gave the example, jet fuel. You know, airlines. We're not going to require them to electrify, and nobody's going to want to necessarily do it 100% of ethanol. Okay? Just not picking fights, just talking about reality. So that's what you have to do. Now, they did an analysis on sequestration. California, big state. They got a bunch of places where they can sequester this. So they computed the combustion, they figured out they got to build pipelines. They said, no, look, you got to build pipelines. You got to move this stuff, and you got to be able to sequester it, and there are costs involved. Okay, so they figured that out. Then they said, now, you know, the other thing that you ought to look at, you ought to look at biofuels and biomass. We got biomass, right? We have forests, people might not like it, but you know, if you manage your forest, you can get an awful lot of biomass. And by the way, you can get methane from landfills, you know, there's methane, there's ethanol, there's ways that you can move in this direction. Again, you can keep refineries going, keep manufacturing going, you keep natural gas, you know, going. You don't have to ban anything, okay? Change land management. That's a little controversial, I recognize that. But again, you don't have to get Congress to enact any laws. You don't really have to change a whole lot, right? And then increase renewables. There's only so much land space. California's big, but even they knew that you weren't going to put photovoltaics across the whole, you know, Central Valley. You know, that just didn't make sense, right? So there's only so much that you could do, but you could do some. And then finally they said, after you do all that, you know what? You're still not going to make your emission reductions. And so you know what you need? You need direct air capture. They're just laying it out. They're just laying it out, right? You're not going to get to 100% renewables. It's fanciful. Not going to get there. You ought to start looking at direct air capture. So every town is going to probably have a direct air capture. Just pull CO2 directly out, make CO2, figure out what to do with CO2. You can either store it, you can make products out of it. I mean, it's carbon dioxide, it's carbon and oxygen. You can do a lot with that. They said it would cost Californians, and again, this is a light study. I mean, you know, they don't really do it with all the modeling, but it costs $1 billion a year for the citizens of California, if that's what they want to do. So I offer that, not necessarily that California is going to start putting direct air capture out there, but you can have a conversation without saying, well, you got to put a tax, or you got to ban, you know, natural gas, or you got to ban fossil. You don't have to start with any of that stuff. It's just people like this in a room. You look around and you go, okay, there are going to be devices like this that I'm going to have to build and put in place to capture, store, utilize, make new products. I mean, it's a great story. I mean, you know, we're going to have hydrocarbons for a long time. I mean, hydrocarbons, you know, make healthcare, you know, consumer products, agricultural, you know, needs it, automobile, you know, medical products, prosthetic devices. I mean, we're not giving up on plastics or hydrocarbons anytime soon. You know, now we're putting in place processes to capture the plastic, to upcycle plastic, the polymers, greater use. You know, we've got all these initiatives. So at this department, we've started initiatives. We talked about water. You know, we started with plastics, you know, finding new uses for carbon. We've got these initiatives that will really push storage, right? We need storage, whether it's battery or it's storage. These are the initiatives that this administration, you know, has started. And so we're trying to get the technological breakthroughs to take these issues off the table going forward. It's a good story, because as we come back from COVID, we realize we're over-dependent on supply chains out of this country. All the rare earth elements, you know, that we need, and critical minerals and materials, a lot of that is outsourced. We depend on China for a large percent of our rare earth elements and materials. As we come back from COVID, let's regenerate the U.S. supply chain for these things. You know, let's bring that back. And same thing with these breakthrough technologies. We want to make those discoveries here in the United States. We want to apply them here, and then we want to export that to the other countries. So the EU, the Mideast countries, others come to us, and once again, we're leading in technology, leading the world in technology. We can't see the technological leadership to others. We need to keep it, and that's why, you know, the department spends a lot of money on research and development. We do. And we need to keep doing that. So this administration is committed to that. We want to make the U.S. the leadership in all the areas that I talked about. We want to revitalize all of these different energy sources and keep them strong. You know, let's have an intelligent conversation about how it is that we can do it environmentally. I mean, I'm from the ecology movement. I mean, that's how old I am, right? I mean, I think everybody's an environmentalist. Let's be the leader, and let's do it. And so that's my long-winded way of answering that question.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. My question, I think, feeds right into what we were discussing just now. So it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that the Department of Energy has a supplier diversity office specifically. And my question would be, as we're all here to try to better our state of New Mexico, is that well known in, you know, how do places like this get in contact with that office, and how does that opportunity for doors open for different companies here?
Thank you. That's really a great question. Yeah, not many people know the outreach, you know, that we have for STEM training, for inclusion, for diversity, inclusion, for educational opportunities. And indeed, we have it across the department, and it includes not only the Department of Energy program offices, you know, that you have, and it applies throughout our Office of Science and all of its science labs. Our individual labs have programs, but it also extends to our NNSA side of it. So our National Nuclear Security Administration also has programs. So you can go to our website, and you will see that the programs are quite comprehensive. Some of them are aimed at getting students interested like at the high school level, and then some at the college level. We have intern programs. We have programs with the universities. We have programs with the labs. We have programs at DOE itself in its offices and at sites and its facilities really across our country. We team up with you know, different organizations. So we try to leverage our relationships with the organizations and what's going on within the states, so that we can help pull more and more, you know, folks who otherwise wouldn't be reached, you know, for this type of, for these types of opportunities. So our website's the place to be, to go on that, and happy to follow up with you.
Do we have time for one more question? Okay, one more.
Thank you. Deputy Secretary, I appreciated your comments at the beginning of your statement about how the United States is both a global leader in production, but also a global leader in emissions reduction. And that is largely because of the technological advances that we talked about that our industry has deployed and that your agency has supported. I also want to take a moment and just recognize that we're having this discussion in the middle of one of the greatest economic recessions that a lot of us have ever seen in this country. And in the last recession in the early 2000s, the oil and gas industry was really instrumental in bringing us out of that recession, both by providing jobs to states like New Mexico, Texas, North Dakota, empowering those states, but also in providing affordable, reliable energy to every American family at a time when many basic cost of livings were going up, from healthcare to education. Energy prices were actually going down relative to cost of living. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the importance of this industry in helping us recover from the current economic recession that we're faced with, both in New Mexico, but also across the country, where we're losing not just oil and gas. We've lost not just oil and gas jobs, but manufacturing jobs and others, and we're really that affordable, reliable energy is more important than ever.
No, that's an excellent question. As we come back from COVID, the question is, what policies do you want to have in place to ensure that you have a strong economic recovery? And historically, when you look at this, the people in this room know that, it's typically the energy, and as you had said, with the shale revolution, the investments that are made in the energy production, that together with President Trump's tax reforms and the dereg, really brought the U.S. economy at levels you've never seen. We had historic low unemployment in all categories, historic. When the U.S. economy takes off, it drives the global economy. Demand for oil hit highs over 100 million barrels per day than it had ever seen. And it goes back to what Ann said about the energy renaissance in the U.S. drove our economy. Daniel Yergin has his new book out, The New Map. I'm not here to say that you need to go buy Daniel Yergin's book. That's not the purpose. But if you just read the first couple of chapters, it tells the story of America shale revolution. He has a site in there, if I remember it correctly, that 40% of the U.S. industrial capitalization during the shale revolution was 40% of the entire U.S. investment in capital expenditures. 40%. That's really all you need to know about what drove the American economy, what drove the jobs, what drove low unemployment. I've had the privilege of traveling with the President on Air Force One to attend some ribbon cutting ceremonies. We went to Hackberry, Louisiana for an LNG export facility. We had members of unions there. They were saying they were never so fully employed, that they were recruiting people. They had to train people. They were investing in training facilities to meet the demand for energy construction jobs across this country. They were not complaining, but they wanted more money for training facilities. Think about training. So when we come out of COVID, what policies do you want? Right? What's going to get us back to where we were? Right? People want to work. They're going to come back. So we'll see a demand for energy increase. We naturally will. I mean, already, forecasts are already, in the upper 90s million barrels globally at the end of next year. So, I mean, it's not as high as it was. But still, that's going to be a lot of energy use. Do you want to throw out those policies that got us here? I mean, do we really want to say, oh, well, now's the time that we should just simply put in place, you know, a Green New Deal where every new electron has to be a renewable? I mean, do we honestly think that that's going to get us anywhere, right? So the other thing to remember is that this recession that we're not caused by any economic policies that went bad. It wasn't caused by a fear of, remember, pre-COVID, any kind of debt limit, any kind of trade imbalance, any kind of monetary policies that weren't sound. It was COVID, a pandemic, the likes of which we've never experienced. So we don't have to change economic policy, in my view. We don't have to change any policy. Let's keep the policies in place. Now, let's drive the innovation. People are going to come back. It may be that not everybody goes to their office anymore. Okay, well, fine. But guess what? They're going to need energy. Now, you're way more concerned that you have the energy at your house when you need it, right? So for states like California that say, you know what, when you need electricity, we're going to shed load. I don't know if you noticed the demand numbers in California when they went through their crisis recently. It wasn't record demand. It was not record demand. It was summertime. It was summertime. And they couldn't meet the load, which was not all that high. What happened to the generation? Shuttered. Replaced by intermittent wind and solar. All studies show when you need wind the most, when you need it, it doesn't work. Called the doldrums. There's a reason it's hot. The wind's not blowing. Right? I mean, this is basic fundamental stuff. So I talked to my European counterparts. Green New Deal. I mean, you know, they got their own Green New Deal, the green policy. They want anti-fossil. They want 100% renewable. You sit them down in a room like this, you just talk about the facts, and they leave the room going, you know, we might go with clean. I like that, you know, that carbon capture stuff. You might want to look into that, you know. It's remarkable. But you just got to get them in a table, you got to get them at a round table like this, and just have a conversation about it. And they'll embrace the path forward. I'm here to tell you, keep the current policies in place, keep the current administration, and you will see a healthy return, similar to what we've seen. It may take us a while to get there, but you'll see that. And energy will be driving.
Mark Menezes, Deputy Secretary of Energy, thank you so much for being here. We have a commemorative coin for you from the New Mexico Business Coalition. We want to thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it. It's a passionate conversation that could go on for days because everybody in this room, yes, everybody in this room is very proud of our energy department. We are very appreciative of you sharing this great news with us. Here in New Mexico, you know, being in a discussion of the country's historic energy independence and the role that New Mexico has is important to all of us. And we appreciate being the platform for you to share that with us. We want to thank our sponsors of today's event, ConocoPhillips, Chevron, and Independent Petroleum Association of New Mexico. I want to thank all of our guests for being here. You are very special to us. We appreciate your time. And I want to say, God bless you, all of you, Secretary Menezes, the administration, and all the people that keep us safe every day. I pray that you stay safe, and thank you for your work and your passion for this important industry. Thank you to all of you that joined us today. Goodbye.